I bought this visual diary a few months ago and I've just finished my 4th painting in it. A few of you mentioned you'd like to see me paint an autumn leaf. So I'm going to show you how I painted this one in this video. If you're new here, I'm Louise Masi and I post tutorials like this one every week. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss any content. It's winter in Australia at the moment and all the leaves have fallen off the deciduous trees, and we've got this beautiful liquid amber that grows on our property, and this is one of the leaves from that tree. So I'm just going to paint it today in my visual diary. So I'm just painting a wash of Winsor lemon over the top of the whole leaf at the moment. I just want this to be an underwash that should glow through the red when I paint the red on. So the red that I'm going to use is called Anthraquinoid Red by Daniel Smith. And it's a beautiful warm red-violet colour. It's transparent. And I hope that it's going to add a beautiful depth and richness to the leaf. So I give it a squirt of water and then I mix some of that pigment into the water. So I'm just going to wet section by section with some water because I want to paint wet on wet. So I'm just using my Maestro brush just to paint over the yellow base with some water. So I dried the yellow base off with a hairdryer before I did this. So now I've got some of that red and I'm just working it onto the damp paper. So I just have to paint it carefully around the edges so that I get some of those serrations on the leaves showing. And then I run it carefully along the vein line as well. I'm painting the leaf in segments so that I can try and keep that vein that runs down the centre still showing. So I've moved over to this area to try and give those other red areas a chance to dry. With each segment, I'm just wetting the paper slightly with some water before I paint the red on, so that I can paint on damp paper. And that way that'll keep all my brush strokes soft and I won't get any hard edge brush strokes forming. I've been using my Maestro brush to paint all of this. And now I'm going to switch to a larger brush. This is a Casaneo brush. And I'm just starting to remove some of that paint on this side of the leaf. I'm just dabbing my brush on a towel just to take off that excess paint, and I want some of the yellow underwash to show through here. So I do it before the paint starts to dry. And the same thing here. This brush is larger so that I can remove paint quicker. And you can see that yellow underwash showing through now. So I've just got one little segment to go now. Before I do that, I'll just remove some more of the paint with the Casaneo brush. So I'm just dabbing it on my towel. So this is Imperial Purple that I'm putting on my palette. This is by Daniel Smith as well. And I'm going to use this colour to start painting some of those purple markings that are on the leaf. So I've dried it off with my hairdryer and now I'm re-wetting it with some water. So before I paint the purple markings, I just want to deepen the red in places. So again, I want to work on damp paper. So I just wet the leaf segment that I'm working on, and then I'm going to paint some more of that red colour onto the leaf. just to deepen the colour. So back to my smaller brush so that I've got more control. And then I just paint it carefully along the vein line, and then I can push it out further. And I need to try and work fairly quickly so that the paper doesn't dry. So I want to be working on the damp paper just to keep my edges soft. So while that red paint's still damp, I just want to drop in some of the Imperial Purple, just here and there. So now I'm just wetting the paper up further. And I just want to deepen the red colour here as well. So I've just got some of the watery red, and I just drop it onto the damp paper. Try and paint it carefully up along the vein, and then I can just push it out towards the edges of the leaf. Now just with a damp brush, I'm just softening paint edges so there's only moisture on my brush. And then I drop in some more of that Imperial Purple. Sometimes the paper might be too wet. And then if it's too wet, the paint sort of spreads everywhere. So sometimes you might have to wait a little bit longer till the water absorbs into the paper more. And then you have a bit more control of where the paint goes. Now I've got my liner brush, and I'm just running some of that red paint along the edge of this part. That way I can paint in some of those serrated edges and just deepen the colour along the edge. And now I've got my Maestro brush again, and it's damp with just a little bit of water, and I'm just softening the edge of the paint. I've got a waterline here showing, and I'm just using my damp brush just to remove it. So now I've got some more of that Imperial Purple, and I'm just dropping it onto the damp paper. I've switched to my liner brush so that I can paint some smaller purple markings. So then I just continue onto another segment of the leaf, and I wet the leaf area there with some water again, and then I just paint the red paint on just to deepen the colour again. So it's just getting a second layer of the red. And then before that paint dries, I'll just drop in some more of the Imperial Purple. And I can use my liner brush just to tidy up the edges of the leaf. I'm just going to dry it off now with my hairdryer. Now that it's dry, I can paint in this area here. So I'll wet the area with some water first before I paint the red paint on. And I put the water on as carefully as I can. I don't want it to be too wet with lots of puddles, and I don't want it to be too dry either. I just want a nice even coverage of water. And then when I've got a nice even coat of water on the top, I can start painting the red paint on. And then before that red paint dries, I drop in some of the Imperial Purple. So So I've just finished painting some more of the red further up the leaf, and now again I just drop in the purple before it dries. And then when I want a bit more control, I just switch to my liner brush. I just run it along the edge just to give me a nice edge and to give that leaf a slight curl there on the edge. So over on this other side of the leaf, I've done exactly the same thing. I wet the paper first, and then I painted another layer of the red paint. And then while that red paint was still damp, I dropped in some of the purple. So now I'm painting the red onto this section here, just on the damp paper. And then before it dries, I use my liner brush just to drop in some more of the purple. Just here and there, just little spots. So I'll just speed this section up so you can see me do it. So I'll wet it with water. I'll put the water on carefully. And then on goes the red paint. So it's watery red. And I'm just sort of dotting it with my brush, just so that I can leave some of that yellow underwash showing. And then I switch down to my liner brush. I'm just tidying up the edges. And then I can drop in some of that purple paint while the red's still damp. And you can see little areas of the yellow paint showing through still. Then I do the same thing on this side. Some of the red paint. I leave some of the yellow underwash showing. Bit more water here. And then I use my liner brush just to bring that nice point onto the leaf. And I soften any edges that I don't like with my damp Maestro brush. And then on goes the purple with the liner brush, while that red's still damp. So I've dried everything off with my hairdryer now. And what I want to do now is just add a bit more detail onto those purple spots. So I just want some damp paper again, but I don't want it to be too wet. So I'm just going to take a little bit of moisture off with a tissue. So I put it on with the brush first. And then I just take my tissue and I just take just a little bit of the moisture off, just so the paper's just damp. And then I can go back in with some more of the Imperial Purple and just be a bit more selective where I put it now. I'm just painting over those areas where I put it before, but because the paper is only slightly damp now, it's nowhere near as wet as it was, the paint doesn't go everywhere. So I went all over the leaf with the purple. I've dried it with my hairdryer. And now I've re-wet along the vein line with some water. And I'm just painting some more of that red paint, just along the vein line. I'm just pulling it out in places, just letting it bleed with the water. So now I've got a Prismacolor coloured pencil. This is light peach, and I'm going to use it to draw over the veins just to bring them back, because after all those layers of paint, I've pretty much lost them, so I just want to put a bit of colour over them just to bring them back. And then what I'll do is I'll put some paint over the top of the pencil just to make the pencil line less noticeable. So just speeding this area up. Okay, so now I'm just painting in the stem of the leaf. Just painting on dry paper with the red paint. And then while that paint is still damp, I'm going to paint some Imperial Purple down the left side of the stem, just with the liner brush. And the purple paint just bleeds onto the red paint and just gives those lovely soft edges. Now I want to paint the cast shadows formed by the leaf, so I'm just wetting the shadow with some water. And now I've mixed up a grey colour, sort of a bluey grey. This is burnt sienna mixed with ultramarine blue, and I just start to paint the shadow in with that, just onto the damp paper. So I establish this shape with the grey, and then I'm going to drop some other colours onto it. So now I've got some of the red paint that I used on the leaf, just dropping that onto the damp grey paint. And now I've got some of the Imperial Purple. I'm doing the same thing. I'm just going to run some of that grey paint down the left side of the stem as well, just to form the shadow there. And now I've just painted this other side of the shadow with some of the grey mix, just on the damp paper, and I'll drop those two colours in again. So the first one is the red that I used on the leaf. Just drop it in next to the leaf. And then I use my brush just to spread the paint out. And then I'll drop in some of the Imperial Purple as well, just on the outer edges. Now I've done the same thing over here. I've put the grey on first. Now I'm using the red. And then I paint some purple on the outer edges. Some more cast shadow up here. And also on this side as well. Now I'm just washing some watery cadmium red just over the top of the pencil lines where the stem was. And just here and there on the outer parts of the leaf. I've added a lot of water to the cadmium red just to make it transparent. So that just tones down the pencil and just adds a bit of brightness to the leaf as well. Okay, so I'm happy with that. This is actually the 4th painting in my visual diary. The first painting I painted this little wren, and there's a tutorial on YouTube for this wren. The second one was this orchid, and I've also got a tutorial on YouTube for this one. And I have a tutorial for this iris as well. So this is the 4th one in my book. If you enjoy these tutorials, in case you don't know, I've recently opened an account on Patreon where patrons can get access to my full-length tutorials for as little as $6 a month. And I'll be adding new tutorials every month. There's a link in the description if you want to know more. I also have 9 classes on Skillshare now, and I'm working on my 10th. In my latest class, I demonstrate how I painted this galah. So that one is coming soon, and I'll let you know when it's available. Let me know in the comments if there are any particular subjects you'd like me to paint. I read all your comments and I keep your suggestions on my computer. And your suggestions help me decide what sort of content you want to see. So thank you and keep them coming. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. I've got some really special tutorials coming up, so stay tuned.